Born in 1861, Dr. Rudolf Steiner was a great Austrian polymath, philosopher and scientist who made influential contributions in the fields of education, science, spirituality and medicine. He is perhaps best known for pioneering the holistic educational methods for the Waldorf schools. An eloquent public speaker and gifted writer, he gave over 6,000 lectures in his lifetime and also gained recognition as a literary critic. His writings cover a wide range of subjects, and he published more than 25 books, including Mysticism at the Dawn of the Modern Age, The Way of Initiation, and Intuitive Thinking as a Spiritual Path, The Philosophy of Freedom. He developed and taught an esoteric spiritual philosophy called anthroposophy based on the science of the spirit. Let us now continue with the extract from the chapter The Higher Education of the Soul from Rudolf Steiner's book, The Way of Initiation, also known as How to Attain Knowledge of the Higher World's Initiation. The Higher Education of the Soul. Many people grow impatient or skeptical because they have for years cultivated certain qualities of the soul, and yet clairvoyance has not ensued. They have developed only a few qualities and have allowed others to run wild. The gift of clairvoyance first manifests itself when all those qualities that do not permit the development of the latent faculties are suppressed. Undoubtedly, the beginnings of such hearing and seeing may appear at an earlier period, but these are only young and tender shoots, which are subject to all possible error, and which, if they be not carefully fostered, may quickly die. The qualities which have to be combated in addition to anger and vexation are such as ambition, timidity, curiosity, superstition, conceit, the disease of prejudice, idle love of gossip, and the making of distinctions in regard to human beings, according to the merely outward marks of rank, sex, race, and so forth. In our time, it is difficult for people to comprehend that the combating of such qualities can have any connection with an increase of capacity for knowledge. But every devotee of occultism is aware that much more depends upon such matters than upon the expansion of the intellect or the employment of artificial practices. It is particularly easy for a misunderstanding of this point to arise, inasmuch as many believe that one should cultivate foolhardiness because one must be fearless, and that one should ignore altogether the differences in man, because one has to combat the prejudices of race, rank, and so forth. Rather should one first learn to appreciate these differences correctly. Then one is no longer entangled in prejudice. Even in the usual sense, it is true that a fear of any phenomenon hinders one from estimating it rightly, that a race prejudice prevents one from looking into a man's soul. The student of occultism must bring his common sense to perfection in all its exactitude and subtlety. Even everything that a man says without having clearly thought it out will place an obstacle in the path of his occult education. At the same time, we must here consider one point that can only be elucidated by giving an example. Thus, if anyone should say something to which another must reply, the one replying should be careful to consider the intention, the feelings, even the prejudices of this other person, rather than what he has to say at the moment on the subject under discussion. In other words, the student must apply himself keenly to the cultivation of a certain fine tact. He must learn to judge how much it may mean to this other person if his opinion be opposed. It must not be imagined for a moment that he ought for this reason to withhold his own opinion. One must give to the questioner as careful a hearing as possible, and from what one has heard formulate one's own reply. In such cases, there is a certain thought that will constantly recur to the student, and he is treading the true path if this thought becomes so vital within him that it grows into a trait of his character. The thought is as follows: "It matters little whether my view be different from his. The vital point is whether he will discover the right view for himself if I'm able to contribute something towards it." By thoughts of such a kind, the mode of action and the character of the student will become permeated with gentleness, one of the most essential qualities for the reception of occult teaching. Harshness obscures that internal image which ought to be evoked by the eye of the soul, while by gentleness many obstacles are cleared from the way and the inner organs opened. Along with this gentleness, another trait will presently be developed in the soul. He will make a quiet estimate of all the subtleties in the soul life around him without considering the emotions of his own soul. And if this condition has been attained, the soul emotions in the environment of others will have such an effect on him that the soul within him grows, and growing becomes organized as a plant expands in the sunlight. Gentleness, quiet reserve, and true patience open the soul to the world of souls and the spirit to the realm of spirits. Persevere in repose and retirement. Close the senses to that which they brought you before you began your training. Bring into utter stillness all those thoughts which, in accordance with your previous habits, were tossed up and down within you. Become quite still and silent within. Wait in patience, and then the tranquil higher worlds will begin to develop the sight of your soul and the hearing of your spirit. Do not suppose that you will immediately see and hear in the worlds of soul and spirit, for all that you are doing does but help the development of your higher senses, and you will not be able to see with the soul and to hear with the spirit before you have to some degree acquired those senses. When you have persevered for a time in repose and retirement, then go about your daily affairs, having first impressed upon your mind the thought, "Someday, when I am ready, I shall attain what I am to attain." Finally, make no attempt whatever to attract any of these higher powers to yourself by an effort of the will. These are instructions that every occult student receives from his teacher at the entrance of the way. If he observes them, he then improves himself, and if he does not observe them, all his labor is in vain. But they are difficult of achievement for him only who has not patience and perseverance. No other obstacles exist, save those which one places for oneself, and these may be avoided by anyone if he really wills it. It is necessary to continually insist upon this point, because many people form an altogether wrong conception of the difficulty that lies in the path of occultism. The adept in occultism could, indeed, say much concerning these paths, much that might seem strange to an uninitiated hearer. For example, suppose that someone has advanced far along the occult path, and wholly unaware of his nearness, may be standing at the entrance to the sight of the soul and the hearing of the spirit. And then he has the good fortune to pass peacefully into its very presence, and the bandage falls away from the eyes of his soul. Suddenly he can see. His vision is attained. Another, it may be, has advanced so far that this bandage needs only to be loosened, and by some stroke of destiny this occurs. For another one, this very stroke might actually have the effect of paralyzing his powers and undermining his energy, but for the occult student it becomes the occasion of his enlightenment. Perhaps a third has patiently persevered for years and without any marked result. Suddenly, while tranquilly seated in his quiet chamber, light envelops him. The walls become transparent, they vanish away, and a new world expands before his opened eyes or is audible to his awakened spirit.
No to vegan. All bad people do that.
Splendid viewers, it's been a pleasure to have your company for today's The Higher Education of the Soul from The Way of Initiation by Dr. Rudolf Steiner, Vegetarian, Part 2 of 2 on Words of Wisdom.